And going into that Tennessee game, which we're about to talk about, that big time SEC matchup, that week 4, first week of SEC play for Oklahoma, you're going to need to have everything cooking on all cylinders. We'll discuss what Oklahoma has to do in that Tennessee game, what we're going to expect from the Vols, and is it a must win? We'll talk about it. Coming up next on Locked On.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Tennessee Volunteers will come to Norman likely as a top 15 team in the country, maybe even a top 10, depending on what happens around the rest of the nation in the first 3 weeks. Well, really 4 weeks if you count week 0. So that could be a big time matchup. It's going to have national eyes and national attention and is one of the better matchups in week 4 in the SEC. The Oklahoma Sooners, they're going to be tested early and often. That's an offense that averaged 31 points a game. They ranked 35th in the nation last year, and a defense that ranked number 22 in scoring defense at 20.3 points per game. This is going to be a balanced Tennessee team. And hey, they're breaking in a 5-star quarterback in their own right, and Nico Iamaleava, a good player, but still, he's going to have to go into Norman, and he's going to have to battle an intense crowd, a crowd that is going to be as jacked up as any home crowd as we've seen in the last several years for that first SEC matchup.
You know, the game that to me that's going to really define how I'm going to feel about Tennessee coming to town is going to be their second game of the season, right? So they're traveling to Charlotte to play against North Carolina State at the Bank of America Stadium where the Carolina Panthers play, and they're doing that neutral site game, right? And North Carolina State's not a slouch of a team, right? They actually have a very scrappy team. They're always typically pretty scrappy when it comes to especially defensively, and usually offensively they have enough to get them going. But that's going to be a crowd that we're going to get to see how Nico handles. And just as you said, John, perfect thing. He's coming to us, 80,000 fans that's going to be screaming at him. Now, granted, we're probably going to show Heupel a little love initially. They're going to do a video and everything. But please, fans, don't get it twisted. We're going to lose our minds on them again, just like we did the last time they came to town. And they lost, what was it, 34-10 or 34-13, something like that? We're going to go back to that. We're going to go after their throats. The fans are going to be loud and wearing them out. And so Nico Iamaleava's got to have to figure out the focus and the stadium pulse the entire game. He's going to have to be able to see if he can handle that rattling and if the routes on the field start moving around on him because the fans are going to be in it. That's what we're going to have to bring if we want to increase our opportunity to be successful. And so you asked this question initially. Is this a must-win game? John, when I look at this one, I'm going to say just like everybody else is going to say in the comments, yes. And the reason is, it's just because it's the first one. Mm-hmm. No other reason outside of that. If it wasn't the first one, I wouldn't even say it's a must-win game. But it's the first one in conference. Now, like I said, we played them recently. In the last 10 years, we played them twice. But because it's the first game in the SEC, we have got to set an example. And if we shut down this offense, whoo, buddy. Notice. The SEC's on notice. Do you think this is a must-win as well?
I mean, yes. I think so. Just because you're bringing Josh Heupel back to town, you're trying to show and prove that your defense isn't the Lincoln Riley defenses of old. This is a great test. Yes, Nico Iamaleava is an untested quarterback just like Jackson Arnold. Still, he's a very talented quarterback. If you can contain him in the quarterback run game, you can make sure that him and Squirrel White aren't hitting you for big plays in the passing game, then you're going to have a great chance to slow it down. And I think it's a win for the Oklahoma defense if they can hold them to 24 or less, because I think Oklahoma's offense is going to be able to score. And I mean, they can even do more than that, but it's a huge test right out of the SEC gate for Oklahoma. Is it the best team in the SEC? No. Are they necessarily better than Oklahoma? I don't think so. I don't think that they're as deep or as talented as Oklahoma is across the board, but they do have a good offensive line. They do have some talented skill players. They do have a talented 5-star quarterback. They have one of the best pass rushers in the country in James Pierce that will give Jake Taylor everything he can handle and more. It's going to be a good test. but I do think that it's a must-win game just to get the vibes right, right? It's just I mean, obviously you want to win them all because you want to go to the playoff, you want to contend for a national title, but just to have the right vibes, because you win that one and then it kind of takes a little bit of the pressure off early in the season, but then you got to go to Auburn next. If you come out of the game against Tennessee with a loss and then you got to go on the road to face Auburn, I mean, I think things ratchet it up a little bit, but I'm not too terribly concerned about it. I really feel like Oklahoma wins this game, and I feel like they do so in a fashion that kind of makes everybody take notice.
Yeah, the thing that people are saying the most about Tennessee, and this is something I do agree with, I think they have one of the more underrated defensive lines in the SEC right now. Sure. Their defensive line is good. It's anchored by James Pierce. Their edges are solid. Their DTs, I don't think they're bad. I think that they're okay. We'll see what they look like. I mean, losing Tyler Barron, to me, kind of a big deal, even though he's like flip-flopped like 14 different schools at this point in the portal. But, hey, the thing is that the trenches is where we're going to see this game. So on both of us, as long as our offensive line does enough to give Jackson Arnold time to launch it deep or open up a small enough of a hole for Gavin Sawchuk, Javonte Barnes, Caleb Hicks, and Mecca Megwa, Taylor Tatum to get through those holes and run up the field, and enough time for him to throw it to like a Deion Burks, and then our defensive line does enough to keep Nico under pressure and just make him have to think a lot faster than he wants, we can win this game soundly. Same thing for Tennessee. It's going to be about the trenches. If their offensive line and defensive line has worked in great cohesion, they're going to put us in problems too, right? We're going to be in hell just like anybody else. So that trench play is the one thing that I'm looking at when it comes to this, because their secondary is not very good. And they just lost their main guy, right? They lost one of their main guy that plays like the star money role, kind of like a cheetah / deal that moves around. They just lost him, right? They just had a big time injury. And so that secondary was thin. It's gotten even thinner. All we need is time. We got time. I think Jackson Arnold can pick them apart.
Yeah, I trust the Oklahoma Sooners wide receivers to be able to make plays against any secondary in the country. I really do. And I trust Jackson Arnold to be able to get the ball to him. I think Seth Luttrell is going to have some creative options where they get the ball out of his hand quickly, whether it's in an RPO situation or those bubble screens that we love so much. But I think they're going to go to much faster, much twitchier guy like Deion Burks than what we've seen last year. I think Nick Anderson is going to show a more refined route running ability. So I think the offense is just going to come together, and that's going to be the game where we say, okay, this offense is ready to go. We see it. Now we've seen it. Now we can trust that this is going to be a team that can contend and compete against some of the better teams on their schedule. So, yeah, must-win game. I think Oklahoma wins it. I think they defend home field. They get off to a great start in SEC play.
Yeah, same. I think that once we hit the field, I think everything will completely change for us. And so, of course, I'm stoked. I'm ready for a start SEC play. I'm just waiting for some football, man. Because the guy is Jordan Thomas is the one that's out, and it appears he's going to be done for the entire season. And like I said, he was their nickelback that played everything. That back seven, that whole back seven is nobody's returning right now. So they've got a lot of things to look at. So if we can give Jackson Arnold time, we can pick him apart.
Just one final note here on the Tennessee Volunteers as far as where they rank in returning production, 94th in the nation.
Yeah.
That's not great. Now, a lot of that is due to the fact that they lost their quarterback. They lost, other skill position players as well. But then they come into the season as the number 16 team in the SP Plus rating. So the analytics like the Tennessee Volunteers and what they have to offer as a roster. But as far as returning production goes, not so much. We're going to see. We're going to see what Tennessee's all about when they travel to Norman, Oklahoma for Josh Heupel's triumphant return. Well, hopefully not so triumphant return on September 21. My wife's birthday. So Jackson, BV, Seth, you got to give my wife a good birthday present that day on September 21. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And for your second listen of the day, go check out the Locked On College Football podcast. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports, myself at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all the socials. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Sooners your first listen of the day. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you about the offensive line. Boomer!
Sooner.